Now, what we want to ask ourselves is, what exactly are Israel's goals here? This is very important to understand what Israel is trying to do. Now, if you read the mainstream media in the West, and this includes Australia, what people talk about is that Israel is interested in, number one, defeating Hamas. And here we're talking about decisively defeating Hamas and eliminating Hamas. And you can understand why, from Israel's point of view, that makes sense. The second goal is to get the hostages back. As you all know, Hamas took about 240 hostages, and what the Israelis obviously want to do is get those hostages back. So there's sort of two principal goals here: defeat Hamas decisively and get back the hostages. What's not discussed in the Western media is the real goal. And the real goal is to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And the reason they want to ethnically cleanse Gaza is because, number one, that's the way you get out of apartheid. You all understand. Israel is an apartheid state, and the only way you get out of that situation is you cleanse. Furthermore, it's the only way you defeat Hamas. I'll talk more about this. It's quite clear that the Israelis are not going to defeat Hamas, right? And I can't believe they thought they would defeat Hamas before they went in there. They're too smart for that. But if you cleanse Gaza and you drive all the Palestinians out, you drive Hamas out. So you solve two of the principal problems you face with ethnic cleansing. You solve the apartheid problem, and you solve the Hamas problem. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, Israel wouldn't do anything like this. Just a couple points. First of all, to create the state of Israel, to begin with, you had to do massive ethnic cleansing. In 1948 and in 1967, the Israelis cleansed huge portions of what is today Greater Israel. And the idea that they wouldn't do this, if you read all sorts of Israeli media, they talk about ethnic cleansing all the time. And it makes perfect sense if you think about it. Final point I'd make to you is, one of the criticisms, and I'll talk more about this, of what the Israelis, and especially Benjamin Netanyahu, are doing in Gaza is they have not come up with a plan for what Gaza is going to look like after the shooting stops. In other words, what's the political solution here once the shooting stops? And Israeli military commanders, IDF military commanders, are constantly complaining these days that Netanyahu doesn't give them any sense of what the final political settlement's going to look like, so they can deal with Hamas and deal with the Palestinians with some thought in mind about what the end game is here. The reason there's no end game, the reason they're not talking about how they're going to administer a Palestinian-dominated Gaza is because they want the Palestinians out. They want to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And then that brings us to the question, how do you do this, right? How do you get the Palestinians out? Well, first of all, they definitely went after Hamas to start with. That was the purely military side of the story. They went after Hamas. But to make ethnic cleansing work, you have to, number one, kill significant numbers of people, of Palestinians who are basically innocent Palestinians, not Hamas. You have to kill large numbers of them, and you have to give them a powerful incentive by killing them to drive them out. Number two, you have to make the place unlivable. And that's what they're doing. I mean, they're not just killing people, they're making Gaza unlivable. I could go through this in detail in the Q&A if people want to hear the story. But it is, as many people say, especially the UN people who are there, the place is unlivable. And the reason it's unlivable is because they're trying to cleanse Gaza. It's very important to understand that. And then finally, what they're doing is starving the population. There's all sorts of talk about famine in the northern part of Gaza. The United States is leaning heavily on the Israelis to let food and other kinds of aid in. The Israelis are resisting at every turn. Why are they starving the Palestinians? Why are they killing the Palestinians? Why are they making Gaza unlivable? It's very simple. They want to drive them out. So that's basically what's been happening. And in the beginning, right, there was all sorts of talk about genocide. And I was on the record publicly as saying this is not a genocide. But after December, I changed my mind on that. I think the Israelis are now engaged in genocide. And what's happened here is because they have been unable to get the Palestinians out, they've had to increase the amount of killing that they do, right? They're continuing to push to get the Palestinians out of Gaza. And the way they do that is just kill more and more people and make make the situation in Gaza more and more unlivable, right? So the situation is just getting worse and worse and worse, despite the fact that the United States and actually the West more generally are doing what they can to help feed the Palestinians. So the question is, where are we today? Where are we today? First of all, they've not defeated Hamas, and they're not going to defeat Hamas. Kurt Campbell, who is the Deputy Secretary of State, basically said that yesterday. There are all sorts of stories in the Israeli press that they're not going to defeat Hamas. They haven't gotten the hostages back, and they have not been able to cleanse Gaza. They've not been able to cleanse Gaza. Furthermore, they're stuck in Gaza. They're there, right? They got out in 2005, and they're back there. This is not good. So what you see here is that Israel is in real trouble in Gaza. You see how much trouble Israel is in. They have not achieved their objectives with regard to those two stated objectives and with regard to the ethnic cleansing. And as I said to you before, you always want to understand there are four options here. First two are off the table, and that comes down to apartheid or ethnic cleansing. And the Israelis understand full well an apartheid state. We remember what happened to South Africa. We have got to solve that problem. That's why ethnic cleansing is so attractive. But they've been unable to ethnically cleanse so far. That's that story. That's the story about Gaza.